Welcome to the American Red Cross, the Eastern New York region, and Disaster Cycle Services, or DCS. And thank you for volunteering to help the Red Cross accomplish its mission of alleviating human suffering in the face of disasters. The main goal of this video is to help you choose the role you'll play in accomplishing our mission. We'll show you how Disaster Cycle Services is organized and managed in our region. We'll introduce you to the people you'll be working most closely with, both during your training period and throughout your Red Cross experience. And we'll also explain what lies ahead for you and where to go if you have questions. Our goal is to match you with a job you'll love to do. You've already accomplished quite a bit since you decided to join us. You spoke with a volunteer services worker, and together you decided that you're interested in disaster cycle services. Next, you spoke with someone in DCS to start you on the path that led to this video. And you worked with your regional onboarding mentor to at least start and hopefully complete your introductory training and badge processing. One of your first training courses is Disaster Cycle Services and Overview, and that course gives you a good idea of the breadth and scope of what DCS does throughout the entire disaster cycle of prepare, respond, and recover. And this statement was in that course and gives you a good idea of some of the things that DCS volunteers do. The purpose of Disaster Cycle Services is to help communities and individuals to be more resilient by reducing the impact of disasters on clients, meeting urgent human needs, and facilitating the communities and the individuals' recovery through both direct action and by leveraging and supporting resources within the community. DCS volunteers play critical roles in all of those functions. This picture shows a Red Cross volunteer providing food to a client. But just think about all the things that have to happen to make that possible. Somebody got the ingredients for the food and prepared the food. Somebody drove the emergency response vehicle to get the food out to the affected area. Somebody has to maintain that emergency response vehicle. Somebody is managing the inventory of everything the Red Cross handles, from tractor trailers to knives and forks. Somebody's coordinating all of those emergency response vehicles to make sure the whole area is being covered. Somebody is working with other agencies and government to make sure the entire community is being served. Somebody's managing the communication and technology needs of a very large operation. Somebody is handling living arrangements and feeding arrangements for the volunteers, most of whom are pretty far away from home. Somebody's handling the health needs of clients and volunteers. And somebody has to train all those people to prepare them for the roles that they now play. All of the jobs that DCS volunteers do can be broken into 5 areas, each of which is essential in enabling the Red Cross to accomplish its mission. Engaging volunteers and employees is a set of processes that recruits, trains, and supports the volunteers and employees who make up the disaster workforce. This includes activities that help people choose the role they want to play, grow in that role, develop new skills and abilities, and perhaps someday to move into a different role or a leadership position within the team that they currently serve. Mobilizing the community is a set of activities that helps individuals and groups in the community prepare to respond for disaster. This includes providing information and support, training sessions, meeting with community groups, partnering with fire departments to install smoke alarms, and a number of other activities. Aligning with government helps the Red Cross work with local government agencies to build and strengthen their relationships. This will help communities be better able to respond to and recover from disasters. Information management and situational awareness helps Red Cross and government leaders understand the impacts of a disaster and plan for future responses. Deploying materials, workers, and technology is a set of processes that actually gets the Red Cross onto the scene, providing people, equipment, and supplies to respond to a disaster. This also includes setting up computer networks, communications, logistics, vehicle support, recruiting, assigning, and deploying workers, all of the activities that are necessary to make a response work. Disasters come in all sizes. The Red Cross responds to nearly 64,000 disasters a year, and 90% of these are home fires. Some of the busiest people in DCS are those people who respond locally in their communities to home fires. The Red Cross also responds to larger scale disasters, and that usually involves volunteers from all over the country coming together and forming an organization to handle the response. 95% of Red Cross disaster workers are volunteers, so virtually every position in the Red Cross is available to volunteers, whether it's entry level or expert or leadership. And finally, all Red Cross disaster assistance is free. It's equally available to everyone. So as a Red Cross volunteer, you'll be dealing with a diverse set of clients. Across the United States, the Red Cross is divided into regions, and you're a volunteer in the Eastern New York region. That's the 27-county area you see in green on the map, running from Orange and Putnam counties in the south to the northern state border, and from the eastern state border about halfway across to the west. The region is divided into 3 chapters: the Central and Northern New York, Northeastern New York, and Hudson Valley chapters. The chapter is where a lot of the Red Cross's local business is conducted, and in many cases, the chapter is the public's view of the Red Cross organization. Disaster Cycle Services uses a different map to ensure that our services are available equally throughout the region. This map shows how Disaster Cycle Services divides the region into 4 territories. Each territory has a dedicated staff manager and a variety of volunteer teams. Some DCS activities involve the entire region, while others are conducted in each individual territory. Until now, you've been working primarily with regional level volunteers who've helped you start your training, get your badge, and do all of the other things that got you to the point where you are now. Depending on the position you choose, you might continue to work at the regional level, or you might join a territory team and deal primarily with territory level volunteers. In those positions, it's in your territory that you'll finish your training and do your day-to-day work. This diagram shows how the Disaster Cycle Services organization is structured in the Eastern New York region. First, note that blue boxes represent employees of the Red Cross, and orange boxes represent volunteers. The leader of DCS is the Regional Disaster Officer, who manages the staff of employees who manage activities at both regional and territory levels. The regional managers who report to the Regional Disaster Officer partner with regional volunteer leads to manage activities that span the entire region. These people and these functions are managed from the regional office in Albany. Preparedness specializes in activities like the Home Fire Campaign and community preparedness education. Direct Services is responsible for ensuring that service delivery is consistent across the region and helping territories develop their strategies and plans. Workforce Engagement supports the growth and development of DCS volunteers through activities like onboarding and placement, training, recognition and appreciation, and leadership development. Your onboarding mentor is part of the Workforce Engagement team. And there are some disaster program activities that operate at the regional level. And for each of these activities, the team of volunteers is managed by a disaster program manager and led by a volunteer program lead. Each territory also has a disaster program manager who coordinates all of the territory level disaster activities in the territory area. Just like at the regional level, territory level programs are delivered by teams of volunteers, and each team is managed by a disaster program manager and led by a volunteer program lead. The exact number and makeup of the teams might vary from territory to territory, depending on the needs of the communities in that territory. Now it's time to start thinking about the job you'll do in Disaster Cycle Services. There are a few things you should keep in mind. First, most Red Cross volunteers hold 2 positions. One is the job they do during the steady state or blue sky period when there is no disaster response going on. The other is the job they do during a disaster response in what we call the operational or gray sky period. In some cases, those jobs are very similar, but in other cases, they can be different. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Whatever job you choose, you can always change your mind. You can take on additional jobs, leave jobs, or change from one position to another at any time. Every Red Cross position gives you an opportunity to learn and grow, and most positions also give the opportunity to advance into leadership roles if that's what you'd like to do. Some positions are only available in certain places or at certain times. And also, some positions require professional licenses, such as the disaster health services or disaster mental health positions. Your operational or gray sky position is the job you'll do during a disaster response, whether it's a local or regional disaster, or a response where you travel someplace else in the country to join the response organization. Each operational position is defined by an indicator we call a gap, the group, activity, and position that describes a specific role. Every gap has training requirements, and in order to be deployable in that role, a volunteer has to meet those requirements to earn the gap. Here's an example of a gap. One of the major groups within disaster cycle services is mass care. This is the group that deals with large numbers of clients. One activity under mass care is sheltering. These are the teams that set up and manage shelters. And within sheltering, there's a hierarchy of positions: service associate, supervisor, manager, and chief. So if you're a service associate working in sheltering, your gap would be mass care, sheltering, service associate. Here are some examples of operational positions that are available to volunteers in disaster cycle services. The mass care group includes teams that set up and manage residential shelters for clients who have been displaced by a disaster. They prepare and deliver food to clients in shelters and in the community. They reunite families who've been separated. And they distribute emergency supplies throughout the community to help residents start their recovery. The individual care group provides health services, mental health services, and spiritual support to clients and responders. The recovery group works with individual clients to help identify their disaster-caused needs and match them with Red Cross resources and assistance. The response group includes the disaster action teams, or DATs, who are the first Red Cross responders to most disasters, and disability integration specialists who ensure that Red Cross services are accessible to everyone in the community. The logistics group manages all of the equipment and supplies that are needed for a successful disaster response operation. This includes facilities for shelters and headquarters, procuring, warehousing, transporting, and distributing essential materials. The technology group provides computer operations support, communications, networking, and other services to meet the technology needs of the response organization. The staff services group supports the responders. They manage lodging and feeding for responders who are away from home. They integrate local volunteers into the operation and provide all of the necessary training. And they work with supervisors and managers to ensure that every team gets the personnel support it needs. The Information and Planning Group manages financial and statistical analysis to ensure that the response is being managed efficiently. They also assess the damage caused by the disaster to help the Red Cross and other agencies plan their response and recovery efforts. The External Relations Group works with partners and government agencies to coordinate activities and information. They also manage special fundraising efforts for the disaster response and work with news agencies to keep the public informed about Red Cross operations. As you can see, there are a lot of operational positions to choose from. And also remember, these positions are only active in an operational or gray sky period when there's a disaster operation response going on. So for those reasons, you won't be choosing your operational position right now. What you will do is choose your steady state position. This is the job that you'll be doing the vast majority of the time during steady state or blue sky periods when there is no disaster response going on. Most of these jobs serve the purpose of preparing the workforce to respond, or helping the community prepare for a disaster. and in many cases these jobs support the disaster workforce as it prepares. You can start these jobs immediately. There is no gap. There's nothing you need to do to join a team other than express interest in the team. So that makes this a good position to choose right now. On the next slide, you'll see a list of steady state positions, and we'll give you a brief description of each one. Your onboarding mentor should have sent you a document called Steady State Position Descriptions, and you should use that document as you go through the next slide. If you don't have a copy of that document, please ask your onboarding mentor for one. As you listen to the descriptions, take notes on that document and identify one or two positions that you think might be a good fit. Here are some examples of steady state positions that are available to DCS volunteers. In the first group, Local Disaster Response, you see several of the same names you saw earlier under operational activities. The jobs are usually very similar, but the difference is in the scope of the response. Instead of traveling somewhere else in the country to deliver these services, these teams provide service locally at the regional, territory, or county level in response to local disasters. The Disaster Action Team provides 24-hour emergency response to local disasters, usually house fires. They address the client's immediate needs, including temporary emergency shelter, financial assistance for food and clothing, replacement medication, and emotional support. The Disaster Duty Officer is the dispatcher and manager of disaster action teams in the field. In addition to supporting the DAT, the duty officer also involves other teams as needed to provide all the support that a client needs. This might include client casework, disaster health services, or financial assistance. The mass care team responds to a local disaster in much the same way they respond to a national disaster. They set up and manage shelters, provide food, and deal with large numbers of clients. When there is no disaster, the mass care team prepares. They maintain agreements with the owners of buildings that are used as shelters to ensure that the building will be available and that it complies with Red Cross standards. They develop plans for sheltering, feeding, and distribution of emergency supplies, and conduct exercises to maintain their readiness. Disaster health services, disaster mental health, and disaster spiritual care provide direct services and casework to clients who are affected by local disaster. They work in shelters and aid stations and also participate in DAT responses. They also provide services to Red Cross volunteers and staff as needed. You should note that volunteers in these positions must hold appropriate licenses. The logistics team acquires, maintains, and manages the region's equipment and supplies. They manage facilities, warehouses, trailers, trucks, and cars. They also plan and practice their complex operations to ensure that the region is ready to respond to a local disaster. The preparedness team manages programs that help the community prepare for disaster. Home Fire Campaign volunteers install free smoke alarms in community residences and provide fire safety education. They also work with partners like fire departments to build community relationships. The Citizen Preparedness Corps teaches preparedness presentations to community groups and organizations. The Pillowcase Project and Prepare with Pedro bring education into schools and community settings to teach children how to prepare for emergencies. The Community Partnerships team develops and maintains productive working relationships with non-government partners. The Emergency Management Agency team manages similar relationships with government partners. These relationships help ensure a smooth transition from steady state to operational state operations in the event of a disaster. The Staff Support Team supports the volunteers who make up the Red Cross disaster workforce. Instructors provide basic and ongoing training to help volunteers maintain their skill levels. Workforce engagement volunteers like your onboarding mentor help new volunteers complete training and join a team. Workforce engagement also manages deployment of volunteers to disaster responses, training and recognition programs, and a variety of other HR-style functions. Information and planning gathers and analyzes data to forecast preparedness and resource needs for future operations. The recovery team works with clients to identify available sources of longer-term support and help with recovery planning and problem solving. Now that you've seen the kind of jobs that Disaster Cycle Services offers, it's time to choose your steady state position. Once you've completed this video, contact your onboarding mentor to review your choices and decide which position you'd like to take. At that point, your onboarding mentor will introduce you to your new supervisor, and together, you and your supervisor will begin the process of integrating you into your new team. Once you're settled into that steady state position, you'll work with your supervisor to choose an operational role, earn a gap, and become qualified to deploy to a disaster response operation. Over time, if you're interested in additional operational roles, you can take more training and earn as many gaps as you like. This gives you options when it comes time to deploy. You can also take additional training and have additional experience that qualify you to enter into leadership positions, either on your steady state team or in your operational role. That brings us to the end of the presentation. Again, review your notes from the presentation, especially those about the steady state positions that might appeal to you, and contact your onboarding mentor as soon as possible to choose your first steady state position. And one more thing, the Red Cross wants to know how much time we all spend in our volunteer activities. So Volunteer Connection has a function where you could log the number of hours you spend on things like watching this video, talking to your onboarding mentor, taking training courses, attending meetings, and anything else you do that is part of your Red Cross volunteer experience. So ask your onboarding mentor how to log hours and get into the habit of doing that every time you spend time on Red Cross activities. On behalf of the Regional Disaster Workforce Engagement Team and the entire Eastern New York region, thank you again for joining us. Over 3.6 million people throughout our 27-county, 51,000 square mile area count on us to provide relief to victims of disaster and help people prevent, prepare for, and respond to emergencies. Whatever position you choose, you're going to make a positive difference. Welcome to the team.